Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan McNeil. This is the Builder by Day podcast. Today, I'm having a conversation with Sandy Pembroke and Matt Pyne. Welcome, gentlemen.
How you doing?
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Why don't we start first? Why don't you guys just perhaps introduce yourself? Sandy, tell us who you are and what's going on here, and then we'll just dive into some conversation.
Well, we're probably here because of the film. And so Matt and I are here. Matt's the filmmaker, and I was the subject of a film called UNRETIRED, The Return of Sandy Pembroke. I'm 52 now, and I got back in the ring at Scotiabank Centre in February 2024 after about an 8-year layoff. I had a little spinal surgery and thought the career was done, but apparently not. And Matt was following me around for about a year with mostly himself and then sometimes with a film crew. And he shot that little documentary. So it's pretty good. My day job is kind of, people know me as a marketing guy. I got a company called Sandy Beach Marketing, but basically I help small businesses grow. And I try to blend the two and get people a little bit sweaty, and then we talk about their life and their business. So
do you blend them by, if they opt not to take you up on your business service, you put the boots to them, or?
Yeah, you know what? I think 20 years ago that would have worked, but
Not so much now. Can't strong arm people into doing marketing.
trying to strong arm a guy that owns a company into anything, and you got to kind of guide them.
For sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
Make sure it's their idea.
Absolutely. I did watch the document show. So you produced that? You put that together, Matt?
Yes,
That's
I did.
your work?
And you've seen it?
Yes. Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's very good, man. Very interesting. So I threw it on YouTube. My wife and I watched it. It was last week when we touched base. Yeah, it was good, man. Interesting.
Yeah,
Well
so Sandy kind of introduced me there too. But so I'm Matthew Pyne. I'm a journalist and a filmmaker. And I made the UNRETIRED film about Sandy.
Excellent.
And we've known each other for 8 years. We trained boxing together. And really, through the process of making this film, it's really reignited my interest to get back into boxing and to get into the ring.
Okay.
And so me and Sandy have known each other for a while, but really we haven't known each other as well as we have now, because making the film and following Sandy for a year, there's things I know about Sandy, and honestly, there's things that Sandy knows about me that not a lot of people know about, because this whole process has been interesting. Like it's had its challenges, it's had its, rewards, and yeah, I'm glad to be here to talk to you about everything.
Excellent. So, Sandy, why don't you fill me in a little bit on your boxing and fighting career until now? That's interesting stuff.
Yeah, so I played football at St. FX, offensive lineman. Obvious, we're both pretty big guys. So I think I went into camp at 340 pounds. About
340 pounds?
Yeah, I'm about 250 now.
Okay.
And just when I was done with my undergrad, I went on to do a PhD a couple years later. But I wanted to lose some weight, be normal person sized. And there was a guy that had like a club. It wasn't. He said, "Listen, I'm not the coach. I have a sparring club." And he had a bag of gloves and like shin guards and like little booties for kicks and stuff. And we just started boxing, kickboxing. It was at Ottawa U, and football players, so I was comfortable with them, and I like contact, and grew up doing a little bit of boxing with my twin brother, but like never formally, that kind of thing, just messing around. Got into that, and then pretty quickly met one of the head coaches for the national team, and he got me serious quick, got into peak performance training and that kind of stuff. Won a couple world titles, and then when the UFC got really big, 2005-ish, kind of, the money got dried up for kickboxing, and I had a nice contract offer in Japan. There was something called the K1 back then.
Okay.
And it was basically a salary. They give you a salary and then so much per fight, and it was big money. And I turned that down. I was sort of in the small business world, opened up a couple of supplement stores and that sort of stuff, because I was focused more on that, and kind of early 30s, I guess, by that point. And tried to get some kickboxing fights after opening, I opened up my first store. I'm like, I'll just open this store up. 3 months later, I'll go back. I'll take that contract in Japan. Well, that was a very optimistic entrepreneurial idea. So it was a nightmare, and I was working 18-hour, 20-hour days, had a couch in the back, sleeping there some nights, so I wasn't training. And then tried to get some fights, and they didn't happen. People would be like, oh, he's 35, 37, he's a little bit heavier now, and so they'd take the fight, and then they'd find out who I was, and I had a pretty good reputation, and then they'd cancel the fight. So I had like 8 or 10 fights canceled in like a 6-month period, and somebody offered me a boxing fight. So I hopped into a professional boxing fight at the casino, can't remember the name of the place in Vancouver, Richmond, I think, something. Anyway, and did pretty good. George Chuvalo was there, and then started boxing for a while.
So why would they cancel the fights when they? What was the?
So so actually, that first boxing fight, George Chuvalo was the guest, and he pulled me aside. He's sort of known Canadian boxer, fought Muhammad Ali, that sort of stuff, but he's known for having one of the best chins in the history. And we were having a drink, a little dinner after. He's like, Sandy, you got a chin like I do. And that was kind of like the best thing I've ever heard. Because this guy I looked up to, I like read his book, and he used to like chew like a big wad of bubble gum, like a whole pack of Hubba Bubba to get his jaw strong. And I would do stuff like that.
Okay.
And that, not gifted athletically. I don't have the thunder god in the right hand or anything, but you can hit me with a baseball bat, and I don't like it, but I don't care.
So you're more of a Homer Simpson approach to
100%. Yeah, Drederick Tatum and Homer Simpson. Yeah, that was me.
Good,
They get tired, and then I win.
That's good stuff, man. Well, that's very interesting. So you played football at St. FX?
Yeah.
How's that? Did you enjoy that?
I did. So again, I didn't play football. I keep falling into sports, and I didn't play football in high school. I used to play tackle football with all the guys that played in a bunch of universities in Ottawa. So we'd play literally like just smash mouth tackle, and Sunday afternoons hungover and just sweat it all out. But and then I walked on the St. FX football team, and just good enough to make it. So obviously got better as the years went on. But it was the same thing with the kickboxing and then the boxing career. Just kind of bumping into smashing sports.
Yeah, okay. So what was the time frame on the documentary when you were fighting and you're at Scotiabank Center? What was the time frame there? That's one question I have for you. When was that fight that we saw?
So it was beginning of February 2024 was the fight.
Okay.
And Matt was following me around, kind of shooting the documentary before the fight was booked, and there was a couple other fights that got dropped and this sort of stuff. It's Dana White from the UFC says a boxing fight, it's a going on a business sale every time, because you just want to sell as many tickets as you can and get, the biggest names for the cheapest money kind of thing, right? So, so it's an easy business to get into and an easy business to lose money in. Like it's kind of interesting. So anyway, a bunch of these fights got done. Matt was following me around anyway. We were training at the time quite a bit. I got a gym in my basement. Matt and I were training there, and so he was following me around from probably summer 2023 until summer 2024.
Oh, okay.
And then we're still shooting a bit of stuff now. So, because we're in some talks with a couple production companies that are going to give us some money to shoot either the full length feature doc or an episodic sort of series that follows. And I think Matt will tell you kind of what the pitch is there.
So Sandy was talking about the timeline there. Thanks, Sandy, by the way. But this was on the cusp of a two-week notice fight. So as a filmmaker, there's lots of questions and things that you have to ask before a fight. And that was a challenge because I would be filming Sandy training and pushing himself to the limit, but I'd also be filming him like long interviews. And that's from everybody that I've talked to in the filmmaking world, they were really surprised by that part of it, because they were suggesting that the interviews would be like on different days, so it wasn't taking Sandy like all of his energy and draining. Okay. So I'd really like to hear from Sandy like what that process was too, because I never really asked him, honestly. But like, yeah, there's certain questions that as a filmmaker you can't ask. Like there's certain before the fight questions that you can't ask after the fight for a genuine response. So, I was really in my head as a first time filmmaker, like really worried about like making sure that I asked the right questions, because I wanted to preserve the authenticity of making this film And I wanted to really know what was going in Sandy's mind taking this short notice fight.
Yeah, well, you did a good job of it.
Yeah,
I think it was good.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. I mean, I liked the, well, you said it, the authenticity of it. That's what it looked like. It looked like a real guy telling the real story of what was going on.
Yeah, Matt keeps talking about his first film and this kind of stuff, but I mean, he's been a journalist for a while, and he had that podcast, The Good People, Bad Intentions, and he's been doing it for a long time. He's a good question asker, really he's sympathetic and a lot of times empathetic and like on a deep level. And we wouldn't be here with you today if he wasn't that guy already. So he just had a lot of skill set coming into it. And I remember him pitching me on doing this sort of thing. And I kind of maybe gave him the gears a little bit, but I knew absolutely that I was happy to give him full access because we'd known each other for about 7 or 8 years at that point. We'd trained together. He'd been a student at 2 of my gyms. And so we knew each other really, really well. And as a journalist and the way he asked questions on the podcast, like deeply thought-provoking stuff and super well-researched. So I've been doing podcasts since podcasts have been doing. I came close to Rogan, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. But
hey, listen, man, maybe this will push you over the edge. You'll have you down there. Right? Just give me a shout out when you get up there.
We're at least a year away. I got a buddy that's a good filmmaker, Adam Scorgi. He does a lot of documentaries, big name guys, and he's been on there twice. So I've been in a phone call with the 3 of them. So
awesome.
But yeah, we're super far away. But I'm pretty happy to be here. This is such a beautiful spot.
I appreciate that.
I think Rogan would be your production value is on par.
I appreciate that very much. I don't take all the credit for that. My guy Brendan here behind the camera gets all the credit for the production camera wise. I'm just a talking head. I built the set. I'll take credit for the set. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. I as I mentioned when we talked briefly, the idea of the set is, to build the set. I took a bit of a if you build it, they will come approach, right? And mainly because I had the means to do it, and I'm a builder, and I'm a visionary. I visualize what I want something to look like, and then I build it. And this is what I wanted it to look like, for good or bad. But so far, it's been well received. So I guess maybe we did a pretty decent job of making it look good.
I'm thrilled to meet you because I have none of that ability. So I cannot. Like spatial relations, I think when you did all that standardized testing in high school, did very well in most things, but low on spatial relations. So I can't build a thing. Like I can't visualize what I want to.
That's not uncommon. No. I would say most of the people that we build homes for fit in that category. They just can't physically visualize the house, what it's going to look like, or how the house is going to look sitting on the land, for instance.
Yeah.
What it's going to look like standing in the living room looking around. I can visualize it.
Right.
I mean, of course, partly because I've been doing it for 20 plus years.
Right.
So, you get familiar.
But you had a natural talent for seeing that sort of thing.
For that type of thing, yeah. So, conversely, for instance, my wife is an artist. So the painting behind you, my wife does the paintings.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So any artwork you see in here before you leave in the office, that's my wife. And she'll just sit down with a canvas and she'll just do it. And I'll come home from work that day. She'll go, "What do you think?" So she has incredible talent, artistic talent
sharp.
that I don't have. So I can't. I've never been artistic. Never been good at
fascinating
taking it from brain to hand on the artistic side. I'm far more left-brained.
Okay.
I'm a very left-brained, sort of pragmatic, practical, analytical type thinker. But fortunately, I'm good at having a vision for what it is I'm trying to build, and that could be physically build like a house, or it could be a company I'm trying to build, or an environment I'm trying to build.
So my wife would argue, she's also a painter. She's an artist, sketch, that kind of, she's quite good as well. And she would argue that you're 100% an artist because you're building beautiful homes.
Sure, yeah, no, okay, yeah, that's valid. That's valid, yep.
She tries to convince me I'm a martial artist, and then I do a lot of marketing and that sort of stuff. So I think I have I'm a good art director, and I can make commercials and that sort of stuff. But I can't do that. I can't draw a stick figure, and I can't rearrange furniture in a room. I have to actually physically move it, or it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I kind of think, but then I put it there, and it's not the same as in my head.
Yeah, it's good. That's one thing I find as you go through life and you meet different people, and I think it comes with age. As we get older, you get wiser, of course. And I mentioned last week when I was chatting with a buddy of mine, Lee, who's another fellow business owner. He takes care of the staircases in the homes we build. And Lee's a solid guy. I mean, he's as good a guy as you'd ever meet. He's a beauty, right? And what I said to Lee, and I've said to many people before, is that the older you get and the more exposure you have to more people, for me, the more I appreciate different skill sets that people bring. And not everybody is coming to the table with the same skill set, but I always have a great appreciation for people who can do things I can't. So one like a very simple example would be, you're dead scrolling like everybody does, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, the video lands, and people doing physical feats, these amazing things that these young men and women can do, where you see them kind of just somersaulting down the street and then doing a triple axe, spin around, land on top of a garbage can on one foot. Like, this is amazing, right? And then you'll see in the comments, I always like reading the comments of it. People will be like, I can do that, or that's not that impressive. I'm thinking, man, most people can't even run at top speed. Most people can't sprint from here to there 100 yards without hurting themselves. Yeah. Adults, I mean, who don't train and exercise. And like the Olympics, the older I get, the more impressive I find the Olympics. It's amazing, these people, the physical feats. And we know, you guys know even better than I do, but you know how much time and energy and commitment and effort is behind the scenes to get to that point. It's amazing to me.
It's neat because when you and I had a chat off camera there yesterday, but you've been physically fit your whole life, just played sports, and then you said you've got a good 30-minute routine you do.
Fit-ish. I would say I wouldn't say, I don't like to refer to myself as fit, but I put some effort into it.
Well, it's one of the things Matt and I talk about in the film, and I'm going to throw the compliment back, is you've had that consistent sort of, if not daily, weekly practice of physical fitness. I think you said your family's like that, like your kids are like that, your wife's
we
like
all
that.
pay attention to what we eat a bit, and there's my boys played sports and they play hockey, and I played every sport growing up, and I play golf and I walk the golf course, and I still run across the parking lot when it's raining and jump over puddles so I can get into the liquor store quicker or whatever it is. So I take the stairs 2 at a time. I kind of gauge myself on still being able to do those things, because in my mind I still feel like I'm 18 years old physically. I know I'm not, but I don't, you know what I mean? There are certain things I very practical daily things that I use as a measure as to whether or not I'm still as fit as I need to be.
So I get a little chills there because my twin brother does all that stuff. He does that same thing. He's just constantly thinking about pushing himself physically. And so I'm bigger than I want to be right now. We all saw the film, and everybody watch it, please. But
yes, check it out. We'll put a link to it in here.
Thank you. Yeah,
for sure.
But he always does that, and I do it as well. But the one of the conversations Matt and I have, and I think this might even dovetail into what the next film is, or the series. I'm great at projects. Like, I'm a project guy, and a fight is a project, right? So you have to be a certain weight at a certain time. You have to train specific skill sets. Like, if you and I are going to fight, you're going to be smaller, faster guy. So I need to compete with that, and I have
smaller for sure. We don't know about faster, but I appreciate the compliment.
Well, you're welcome. I'm sizing you up, so.
Okay, good. I got a long reach. I was always told I got a long reach. I'm like, I'm like 6'1" on a wingspan, which is way too long for somebody my height.
Well, we'll get you
somebody told me one time, "Ben, you should have been a boxer. You would have been like outreaching the guys your size."
We'll square off and do some pictures after, and see
how it looks.
Yeah, I like it. But to that point, so for whatever reason, wired that way, set that way, work-wise, contracts, I've been sort of a consultant for years. So I love projects, the beginning, middle, end. I love the ramp up and all that kind of stuff. But my physical consistency between fights was terrible. So, it's like train like a maniac to get in shape for that fight and then die off. And it's rife in the boxing world. I've mentioned it before, but Mickey Ward's one of those guys that's really famous for ballooning up between fights. And he's got a 12-pack in the ring, and then he's got a big beer gut, and Tyson Fury, actually, I don't know if you follow boxing. He's been the lineal heavyweight champion, the Gypsy King. I was one of his sparring partners about 10 years ago for a while for one of his camps. But that's kind of where the Venn diagram of Matt and I was sort of referenced my twin. Matt says, I don't know if it was in one of his clips or reels or in the film. I think, no, maybe it's in one of his reels that Matt's 27, I'm 52. And when I'm coaching him, he's also a great project guy, you know, like the film, getting the school done or the podcast, this sort of stuff. Like he's so task oriented and on it. But the daily commitment to health and that sort of stuff for both of us has eluded us, you know. And so that's what we're working on now. And that's, you know, I don't know if we'll do it on this podcast, but that'll also turn into a conversation with the healthcare system. Because if you're not an advocate for your own health, there's not a lot of help out there right now. Like, you know.
There's so much information now out there about, you know, health and fitness. And like anything, it's for most people, it's trying to navigate through the weeds and find out what's true and what information you should rely on. And unfortunately, we live in a world where you have to give some consideration to who's delivering the message and if there's any motivation behind that from their perspective, or if you can just believe what they're telling you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, but there's so much information out there, and all the information is there if you want it, and you can sift through it and find it. So we should be healthy.
Yeah.
Theoretically. So, you know, I've got a little squat rack in the basement, a few dumbbells, and I try to do a bit of a 30-minute, what do they call it? Like a hit 30-minute hit. Keep the heart rate up. I got a simple rowing machine. Sometimes I'll sit down and do a little bit of rowing, but just, you know, just so I feel like I'm doing something. I've got a golf simulator in my basement. I hit golf balls year round. I'm a golfer. I mean, so that also is certainly not like a hit routine, but it is physical activity. Keeps my mobility up as well, and also keeps me from putting the golf clubs in the garage for 6 months or 8 months and then taking them back out later. So,
well, it's like what they say: a 30-minute hit is better than a 30-second hit. You know.
Sure. So. Yeah. Sure. That's right.
Good for your health.
That's right. It's hard though as you get older. It's just hard to get motivated to work out and exercise and stay fit. It's also hard to eat healthy. And they you know, the grocery stores and the restaurants and so they don't make it any easier. Right? It's, you know, shitty food costs less for starters, which is healthy food costs more than
and takes longer to prepare.
Yeah, so you know, so that's kind of going against us. That's working against us as a society, which is unfortunate, but especially nowadays with, you know, inflation and grocery prices increasing, people are buying what they can afford to buy. In some cases, perhaps even though they know it's not the best thing for them, but you know, hopefully it'll come around.
When I had that radio show years ago, you know, there's big tobacco and big oil and that kind of stuff. I coined that phrase, big food. And you know, your grocery store, all the fitness influencers, and back then and now they talk about, you know, just shopping the outsides of the grocery stores, right? So you've got the fruit and veg section, then you've got the meat section, then you've got the dairy and the frozen food and that sort of stuff. So
right.
If you go in the middle aisles, it's all packaged, processed, and that kind of stuff. And was one of the best sort of thumb rules that I always sort of gravitated towards, and I think I preached about it enough. You know, when I had you do a lot of diet nutrition counseling when you get supplement stores, and then I turned them in kind of health food stores and had a few different chains and that kind of stuff I was involved with. But just outside of the grocery store is really like the outside ring is the easiest thing. And then Matt and I have been having some serious chats about, you know, the difference between buying your meals already cooked and cooking your own meals, and that's kind of been my saving grace the last few years, is trying to keep between the pylons of where I want to be. I've gotten better at cooking.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm no good at cooking, but fortunately for me, I'm married to a woman who's an amazing cook.
So the artist also is an artist in the kitchen?
She's multi-talented.
Nice. How many podcasts before we get the dinner invite?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anytime there is a dinner, you know, in our world, anytime there's a family gathering, you know, it's always we host and everybody gets to come over and enjoy the cooking and baking that my wife can
do. You get into the sous chefing? Do you chop things up, or do you put
I don't
things in the
no, I don't do any of that. In fairness,
Nothing.
my wife really doesn't want me in the kitchen when she's doing her
got
thing.
it.
She's in the zone,
Yep,
right?
yep.
I equate it to, if you were a woodworker, you're in your wood shop, you wouldn't want somebody in there kind of, hey, what can I do? It's more like just
Yep.
give me my space. My she's got a system down. I watch her do her thing. She's super organized, and she really thoroughly enjoys it.
Yeah.
Right, that's therapeutic to her. She loves doing that.
Nice.
And the best thing about it is my children eat well, so I know that they're eating home cooked meals, and it's like all kids they've especially young boys. My sons are 16 and going to be 18 tomorrow. But so they eat, and then they're into the pantry buying handfuls or whatever, and they cook their box of craft dinner like every other teenage boy does. But they're lucky to have a mom that can prepare their meals for them and make their lunches for them when they back when they would take their lunches to school, and it makes a big difference.
Well, I was down in the States for about 5 years, and as Canadians, we like to pound the table and talk about how much better we are than the Americans and things like our healthcare system and that sort of stuff. We're talking about health and being an advocate for your own health and feeding yourself properly and that kind of stuff. It was one of the things, my healthcare for like the later few years, the relationship I was in and that sort of stuff, I had very good benefits. And so you start to learn you can pick and choose your own doctors and that sort of stuff. And you have to interview them and see what,
in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with my spinal surgery, I'll give him a shout out just because his name's amazing and he was great. But honest name was Dr. Hope. Like spelled Hope. So
that's legitimately his name?
Dr. Donald
Hope. He was
Hope.
destined to be a doctor.
He was a neurosurgeon. And he was like, for like the 10 years around I was there, he was like 5 or 6 times. He was on the cover of the Washingtonian magazine for Surgeon of the Year. Like he was just a lovely guy. I used to call him every day for 2 weeks on his cell phone, middle of the day, neurosurgeon, and tell him what I'd learned about spinal surgery and this kind of stuff and why I didn't want to get this surgery at all or maybe push it off 6 months. And I was in a lot of pain and like my left arm was atrophying. I was starting to trip on my left side. Like I was getting bad symptoms. But, I just had other ideas about my life at the time and this sort of stuff. But I would call the neurosurgeon every day for 2 weeks. And I remember after 2 weeks, I was a little bit nuts because, I had this, career-ending surgery, and then I had that sort of stuff. But finally, after a couple of weeks, I started to come back down to this. I'm like, Doc, would you prefer if I just call you once a week with like my rear surgery? Oh, Sandy, that would be great. So we negotiated a time, and I would call him on his drive home. He had like an hour and a half commute on Fridays, and I'd call him on that. And anyway, so to bring that back to where we are in Canada, one of the subtext of this film is just I get back in the ring largely trying to drive my own health forward, like knowing that I'm a project guy and getting back and ready for fights. I'm going to get in tip-top shape again, that sort of stuff. So I'm eating better, I'm sleeping better, I'm working out more consistently, well, very consistently and this sort of stuff. And compared to when I'm not fighting, things start to slide. Like I was keeping my weight where I wanted it to be, and my partner's really good at sort of helping me with body dysmorphia and all those kind of things and making me feel good about the way I look. But there was a swing, so about 245 pounds was a good weight for me. But there's a big difference for me from 245 pounds, and I've got a personal trainer. I'm in the gym 5 days a week, and I'm 245 pounds, and the personal trainer's once or twice a month, and that sort of stuff.
Sure.
So like the swing in just muscle mass for me was crazy.
Sure.
So I didn't even realize how out of shape I was. And like Matt and I talk on the film, and this is the thing I just kneel him about all the time. I'm like, could you have shot worse angles, like down from the ground with my belly hanging out, but at the end of a 2-hour workout where the coach is trying to kill me and, I'm just like, and everything is hanging, this kind of stuff. So, and I think I'm drawing a long bow here on my point, but it was really just bringing it back to like getting back into that regimented sort of process of working out and that sort of stuff. But the other piece was, and I don't know if we'll do this today, but just talking about the healthcare, like there's a whole lot of things that doctors have to sign off on, MRIs and CAT scans, blood work and this kind of stuff, because professional fighting is regulated by the government and it's rigorous because they don't want anybody to get hurt. So it's very different than...
That's here.
It's all over the world.
That happens here, right?
Yeah. All over the world.
Okay.
And Nova Scotia is particularly tight. Ontario was probably the worst place in Canada for a long time, and that guy retired. But Nova Scotia right now is the toughest jurisdiction to get licensed as a professional fighter.
Was that in any way a hindrance to you when you're trying to, you're trying to put the hurry up offense on and you're trying to get
It's a
some things
nightmare.
done? Yeah?
It's the worst part of the sport. Like most people will say, the worst part of the sport is the weight cut. As a heavyweight, didn't have to cut any weight. Just wanted to get as good looking as I could for the the hard work, and I was eating super clean. But you'd only do so much because I was coming off the couch after Christmas, so I'd done some damage. And
We all do that.
yeah, and my swing's bigger than yours, sir. But yeah, so there's two things. So there's a set of rules, and then there's discretion from the commission, so they can just ask for extra tests and this sort of stuff. And to be blunt, they don't want me fighting over 50. I've had a chat with one of the commission guys, and he's been very, Sandy, we need refs. Come do your part. Keep coaching the kids. Stay out of the ring. So we're in a bit of a battle and a Mexican standoff, and they control the reins. But so I got to do a lot of extra tests. It's expensive. Like I spend a lot more money on the tests than I make in the ring, basically.
Is that right?
So, yeah, and it's had to drive to New Brunswick to get an MRI, and really to even just to get to see a doctor, and then have it like, you're my doctor. I'm an old guy that wants to get in the ring. And you're like, listen, I've got all these tests I'm trying to get my patients that are sick, and you're just here for sports. Like,
Right.
Get out of my office.
Right.
So then I'm running around to clinics and trying to get blood work at like some dungeon in Dartmouth, and like it's bad. But it forces me to be more rigorous about my health. So and be more dogged about interacting with the medical system here. And again, trying to not spend too much money on private medical, and there are those centers around here for people that can afford them. But my heart just goes out to anybody trying to just get anything done with a doctor these days. It's terrible.
It's not ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if nothing else, that in and of itself is a good motivator to try to keep yourself healthy, because God forbid you have to start relying on the healthcare system in this country.
Yeah.
It's not good.
And that was my point back then, was the U.S., if you have benefits or you have medical coverage or insurance, way better system than Canada, where it's just the masses,
And imagine there was a time period where we were famous around the world for having this healthcare system that everybody was envious of. We also had an immigration system everybody was envious of. And both of those things now have just been blown apart. And I don't fault by no means do I fault the professionals and the doctors and the nurses and the people in the healthcare sector. It was absolutely not.
It's the political system.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I feel for those folks, because also, unlike in my industry that we talked about, I'm not shy about voicing my opinion when it comes to housing and what's going on with housing, and how quite simply how simple the solution really is. But it just gets, bureaucracy and politics are just getting in the way all the time. Building houses, and a lot of houses in a hurry, and small houses and affordable houses, it's simple. That's simple for us to do. But it's not simple to put it in motion and to get it permitted and approved and funded and all the things that if we're talking, I'm referring to, provincially funded housing and affordable housing. I'm not talking about private stuff, because the private sector, we manage our own business, right? It's supply and demand, but.
Yeah, but to your point, and I've done a little bit in the real estate world, the government still makes you have to jump through, not you specifically, but builders jump through too many hoops. I've a person, a friend, I won't out him, but a friend in the fight world has a property that he's been trying to develop for years, and he's upset somebody on the council or whatever, and they just keep pushing him off and not letting him build these houses. And he's trying to build like 12 or 14 units, on the peninsula. And, it's just bureaucracy and red tape and somebody's ego. And
it's a number of things. But from my experience of the 20 years that I've been building, if I had to put a circle around what the absolute number one limiting factor is, it's the bureaucracy of getting it done, right? There's just, we as the builders or developers, and even anyone in the private sector, even any individual who wants to build a in-law suite in their backyard, for that matter.
Yep.
You get everything put together on your end, you're ready to go, and then you just basically run face first into the bureaucracy wall, and you're standing on the outside banging on the door trying to get in for years on end. I mean, it takes literally years to get a development agreement approved in this municipality. And so you start talking about it today, you start spending, I've talked about this in a couple other podcasts with some folks that are in the industry, and you start the process of, okay, this is what I'd like to build, and physically it fits on the land. We know that. We have all the information we need about water and sewer and setbacks, and we got it all organized. And you put the package together and you put it forth, and then it just
sits there.
It just goes into the log jam.
Yep.
Right. And it's not even a matter of like the old adage of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because it doesn't matter how squeaky you are. You can scream at the top of your lungs. That thing is not going to move any faster than it moves. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, because there would be so many more units and so many more affordable units, and they would be even more affordable if we could remove that. And I don't mean, of course it has to be there. I'm not advocating for the fact that it should be the Wild West and we should just be building whatever we want. As a matter of fact, there are things that recent changes that have been made in council and different things that I don't think are a good idea. They may be removing some of the barriers, but I don't think they're a good idea. Like, for instance, there was talk at one point, I don't know if they fully went through with this or not, but there was talk about removing the requirement for parking on the peninsula for developments. So imagine you build a 100-unit apartment building, and normally it typically used to be like 1.5 parking spaces per unit.
Yep.
And there would be some flexibility in that in order to perhaps get a development approved. Yep. They might lean a little bit one way and say, let's go with 1.3 spaces, Okay. But 0 spaces per unit is a problem. You go down to the west end of Halifax, someone's going to throw up a 50 or 100-unit building with absolutely 0 parking on all these little side residential streets. That's going to be an absolute nightmare.
Yep.
So while it's done in the effort of let's hurry up and get more units built, I don't think you should do that. That's cutting your nose off to spite your face. You can't do that. You can't do something today that's going to have decades long, create issues for everyone around you for the the future, for the time to come. Right? You got to be sensible about it, but there's no consultation between those holding the reins and those trying to get things done. We're not communicating.
I'm wondering, could it be put more broadly as people nowadays, they don't want to take responsibility for anything that they do? Because that's something that me and Sandy talk about. I mean, he's kind of been my accountability partner here. But like, when you're thinking about a politician and what they do, there is now this fear, I think, that whatever they do, they could lose their job or get canceled if they do anything risky. And, when we're talking about like...
Or even anything definitive. Exactly. Even if it's not risky, it's just very definitive. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because I always looked at a leader as somebody who was willing to make those types of decisions that people weren't, maybe it wasn't a comfortable decision or the right decision, but at least they made the decision. But it seems like now people are more concerned about their public image and the long term than actually doing what they're supposed to be and expected to do.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct there, Matt. If you have a politician or a political party as a group, and going into it, they very clearly state, these are the issues, and this is where we stand on these issues, and this is what we are going to do if you elect us, and then hold them accountable to it. But they don't do that. They don't say, this is the issue, here's what we think about it, and here's what we're going to do. Somebody brings up an issue, then they all just start arguing back, screaming at each other back and forth, name calling, you're a dirty rat, you're a criminal, you're corrupt. That's all. Then it just turns into politics. It's like, can we just go back to the issue for a second? Tell us where you stand on it. And then you get into the scenario where we have now, or pick an issue that's in the media. So pick the carbon tax issue. So now we have the people who invented it and promoted it and jammed it down our throats for 10 years, completely flip-flopping and now telling us, we'll get rid of that if you vote for us.
And to that point, this is where it drives me nuts. And a lot of people don't think about this or conceive of it, but I lived in Ottawa, I've worked for the federal government as a younger man. Kill me. I got out of there so quick. And I worked in DC for a while. If you want to read between the lines, I may or may not have been in the back rooms of some political places and doing some consulting work. But to Matt's point as well, we have politicians that have to fight for their job every 4 years.
Right.
So this is what we're talking about, and this is political. And then when you were talking about housing and that sort of stuff, and the same thing for, the medical world, now we have a bureaucracy. So every 4 years, I'm the politician, you guys are the bureaucracy. So every 4 years, I got to fight for my job, and I got to have my stump speech, and I got to have my bullshit, and I got to have, this is what I stand for, and then I'll flip whatever way the wind blows in 4 years, so I get my job again. Now we have so you're fighting for your job every 4 years. Extremely competitive and very binary, conservative and liberal, right? It's where it is. And now we have a level of bureaucracy that runs the government, and they're there for 40 years. They're unfireable. I mean, for you and I, small business owners, I guess you're a small business owner as well now, performance is what happens. That's how you keep your job. That's how you keep your customers. We as the customers have no ability to move this bureaucracy or hold it accountable in any way, shape, or form. And the only person that does are the politicians that are gone every 4 years.
Right.
And they get someone who's the complete other side of the altar trying to interfere with this bureaucracy. Bureaucracy digs in and says, no, we run this show.
Right.
The minister or the whatever it is up here tries to run the show, and then there's this collision here. So the way the system is set up is absolutely shattered broken.
Right.
So how do we fix that?
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%. It's a daunting task to think about how you would fix it. But in my humble opinion, you can only fix it from the absolute bottom up. You can't fix it. And if you fluke out and you get a scenario like they're currently dealing with in the US, where you take this group of people who came together, who are not politicians by nature, and I'm not suggesting that we need it to be a Donald Trump, right? I'm not suggesting that, but it's a very unique situation where this highly accomplished, successful group of people, are now at the top level, right? But I mean, they went through 4 years of nobody was in charge. I mean, no one was in charge down there for the last 4 years. Oh, I mean, somebody was in charge, but it wasn't the person we thought it was.
Right.
And now you have the complete other side of that coin, and we see it in the last couple of days. It's like, Trump gets elected, and it's just bam, 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 all of these executive orders, and people are like losing their mind. But he's doing what he said he was going to do. He ran for election. He said, if you vote for me, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pardon the J6 people. I'm going to get rid of this program. I'm going to cut this. I'm going to do that. And day one, he just starts doing it. So even if you don't agree with it, he told you what he's going to do, and then he did it. Yep. And I think that, that's the only way out of it. But man, you're fighting a huge beast, because you're gonna have to. You're not just fighting for this. I'm assuming now. Let's pretend there's a group. There's an individual or group of individuals that are pursuing this politically. They want to be voted into. We'll say, let's talk provincially, because it's a little easier to get our heads around. And plus, it refers to things like healthcare and housing, the things that we know, or the things that we see every day.
Yep.
So first, you got to, you're fighting to get elected. But then you're also, if you're anti-bureaucracy, then you're fighting all of that. And if 1 in 4 Canadians now work for the government, you got a big fight ahead of you, right? Like, because naturally those who are in the bureaucracy, it's not their individual fault. I don't fault the individual people inside of the bureaucracy. They're doing their job, hopefully. But collectively, right? Collectively, though, you will face so much pushback from not only those who are in power, but those who are employed by those who are in power. And it's going to be a challenge. But I think what you have to keep in mind is that the majority of people aren't those people. And if it's presented in a truthful, transparent, pragmatic way, then the people who have, if they think about it logically and rationally, even those who are in the bureaucracy, they should also be able to look at it and say, yeah, but this is ultimately going to be what's best. And the people who should remain and who are doing their jobs and doing it correctly and taking responsibility, then there's always going to be a place for those people in the government. But I look at, you refer to it as us as the customers, and what do we get for our money kind of thing. And I agree with that. I often think of it as more so as us as the shareholders of the company. Because I look at the government in politics is
Yep.
that's entirely business. The government should have nothing to do with our personal lives. Just manage the business
Yep.
of whatever jurisdiction it is you're elected to,
Right.
whether that's national, provincial, municipal.
Yep.
Just deal with the business. I don't want you to tell me how to live my life or what to think or who I should marry. None of that.
Yeah.
You guys have been elected to be the board of directors
Yep.
for this company.
Right.
And the board of directors then appoints
Yep.
and hires the management staff. So you guys are in charge of them, but all of you work for us. We're the shareholders. Where's the return on our investment?
Your thinking and the way you present it is brilliant. Now, the
simple.
disconnect between what's happening and where we want to be, it's from here to Elon Musk's Mars trip.
Right.
It's
Well, yeah, you look at Andrew Stevens was here yesterday, had a conversation. He said something and it resonated, and it makes perfect sense. He said it perfectly. He's like, here we are in a situation where we'll probably in our lifetime, perhaps, Musk and the Americans will probably put a human being on Mars, but we can't figure out how to get a building permit here in HRM. Like those two things don't make sense, right? It should not be complicated to get our healthcare system organized and get our housing system organized when we collectively as the human race can find out how to put human beings in a spaceship and shoot them off to Mars. It's not complicated.
100% agreed. And we probably should go back to the film in a minute here, but
I was thinking of a way to go back there, and really with us working now on this new project, Sandy's teaching me a powerful thing that honestly I don't think I've ever had, which is responsibility and holding yourself accountable, because he's been very complimentary to me and saying like, hey, you're good at what you do and a good storyteller, but I've been a good storyteller to myself my whole life. I've dodged and not done what I should have done my whole life so far at 27 years old. And Sandy sees me as a younger version of himself, and he has, and one of the challenges of this new project that we've been doing is I'm doing something that a lot of journalists and filmmakers don't do, and they don't do at the beginning, which is turning the camera on themselves and really seeing if this first film that we've just filmed, has it changed me as a person? Am I actually going to do what I was supposed to do and fight 8 years ago when we met? And it's been really challenging. And, maybe me and Sandy are going to need a counselor either during the film or after the film, because it is, we've already exposed Sandy. He's already been out there. And now I'm going to be exposing myself and taking that step. And together, like, we both are fighting. And, I couldn't help but not think about that when you're talking about responsibility, because I'm also trying to think about what type of person I want to be, because I'm still young. And I want that to be an important skill for me, is taking accountability. And I'll be honest, I haven't always taken accountability, and I've always had an excuse or a right thing to say whenever I was being able to be held accountable.
I've listened to other folks, professors and intellects who are smarter than I am and can articulate it better, and they talk a lot about that, about taking individual responsibility, and then once you have your own life in order, then look outward and start to help some others, and then and they talk about it being individual responsibility. Then you look after your household, and then you move on to your community, and you keep doing more and moving outward that way. But it starts with you getting your own shit together and taking responsibility for yourself. And I think if everybody did that, if everybody had their stuff together, it also makes you wiser, and it gives you a better appreciation for just how much hard work goes into being responsible and taking care of yourself and those around you. And then you have a better appreciation for those who have already done that. They have their thing in order, and they're trying to help others get the community in order, or their family, or the organization that they work for. But you're right, it's hanging around with people that know what they're talking about and can influence you positively is a good idea. You're from here originally? You're from
Yarmouth.
Okay.
Small town, and it's something like when I go back, like I feel home now here in Dartmouth or in Halifax. But when I'm back home, I'm reminded that that's where I'm from, and those people, my best traits come from, like being friendly and all those things. But there's also things that I don't like about where I'm from, like sometimes the small-mindedness and ignorance towards things. But the one thing that I really want to learn that my parents both have is to be a hard worker. Mm-hmm. And maybe this generation, or the generation I'm from, they don't really have it as much as some of the older generations, but that's something you don't get taught in school in Yarmouth, or even like I think even in Cape Breton or any of the small towns. Like you really got to work hard to get what you want. And that's what my parents do. They look at me sometimes and I'm maybe not doing that 100%, and they want me to have that skill, and they can't take me to school to learn that.
I can relate to what you're saying there. I'm from, a small fishing village, Jador, east of here, little east of Musquodoboit Harbor. And my dad's family's from Cape Breton, from Glace Bay, and my mom's side of the family is from Jador, and they both go back, many generations in those communities. But I grew up in Jador, and so I currently live here in Fall River, just outside of Halifax where we are. But I grew up in Jador. I was there for the first 18 years of my life. My grandfather was a lobster fisherman. We grew up in that's a little rural, lower middle class community. Like we're all in the same boat there. But everybody worked hard. It was entirely different work ethic. But I know what you mean by when you go back there and that's where you're from and you feel a connection there. I can physically feel that when I go to Jador. I did a development, a small residential development down in Jador on the ocean. It's referred to as Jador Shores. There's a dozen houses in there. There was a time when my brother lived there. My mom was there living in basement in-law suite with him. My uncle currently lives there. My cousin and her husband lived there.
In the development you made?
Yeah, in the development we did. And right there in the community. I mean, it's a mile from where I grew up.
Wow.
But when I go there, I wouldn't go live in Jador now because it's just not convenient enough for me to operate this business. But there's a very distinctive sensation when I'm home in Jador. I'm a Jadorian. That's what I am. I live in Fall River. I take heat from my buddies for being from Jador. Sometimes they like to poke you and prod you a little bit, but I'm a Jadorian through and through. And when I'm there, I can physically feel it, especially if I'm down around the harbor, down around the water. I can feel it. It's like a
the power of the ocean,
almost. And it's a different sensation. And it's a small town, and it's not a town. It's a small rural community. And but man, just full of good people. I remember when I think back to as my childhood, I think back to the seniors in the community that you would just kind of run into, and everybody waved to one another. Nobody locked their doors, and I used to mow lawns and deliver newspapers, and the communities were just far more connected than they are now. But that's where the work ethic started. You didn't really have any choice. It was you just had to, adults in those communities back in the 80s, and so they just had to work. You just had to do whatever work had to be done. But that's also where I get my work ethic. So I feel what you're saying there. It's good. It's good that you can recognize that. And so what else is on the horizon? What's next for you guys?
Well, to what Matt said, I've always, I think I was saying earlier about how I had the kickboxing career and then UFC kind of dried stuff up. I always kept them apart. Like living in Ottawa at the time, and you'd go to a party and one guy would be like, "Oh, you're a fighter, cool," and the other 8 are not. One would be like, "Oh, you're sports, I like sports," but the other 8 was like, "Oh, you're a barbarian, you beat people," and and I was like, okay. So let's not talk about this. So in my business life for years, unless somebody else knew it or whatever, I shied away from media a lot. I ended up doing a lot in different pockets of the world, but this is the first time I've ever brought the two things together. So I've got a very rich collection of people I've been around, interacted with, and touched through business and that sort of stuff, and fighting. I've been all around the world. and those people all exist on Facebook and LinkedIn and
Sure.
Twitter and that kind of stuff. And so this is the first time I really didn't want to show this film to people because it's out of shape and I'm fat and the guts hanging out and, this kind of stuff. But Matt did such a good job of making a film that's not a fight film. Like, I mean, you watched it with your wife. I'm assuming she's not a boxing fan and she enjoyed it, right? Like, it's a human interest story, right?
It's a human piece, yeah.
So I finally said, cap over the wall. And Matt says, yeah, let's get the Netflix deal and this kind of stuff. And we had to have a little fight over the last month because Matt has a lot of talent, a lot of skill, great storyteller. And I'm like, well, listen, man, I've got a friend with four films on Netflix, and we had to talk about this. And he says, let's get our next film paid for or the next series paid for, and then we'll talk about, the big platforms. So that's what we've been doing. And literally, Matt is awfully good at cutting the film up, or we've got a year worth of film.
Yeah.
Aging us here.
2025.
Sorry. 2025. So digital something. Anyway, so we've got a lot of stuff, and we're starting to do the rounds of media and the podcast and this sort of stuff. So we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to do. But to Matt's point, I just basically started taking Matt's content and pushing it out, the film, clips of the film, like cutting up the Global and the CTV News and this sort of stuff. And he's making these beautiful little montages, 30 seconds, and this sort of stuff. And I'm just pushing it out to the world. And I've got all kinds of friends in the film industry and all this sort of stuff. We're looking for some sponsors from various companies that want to get involved and that sort of stuff. And they get, some involvement in the film on the camera and that sort of stuff. And it's been fun to put these two things together. And it's forced me, I'm hanging out with a millennial. Now, you're an elder millennial or something, I forget. Anyway, to that point, he has all the skill and all the understanding of how to reach the world now. And I've been in this space since the 90s. And it's just been this amazing project where we're going back and forth. He said some very complimentary things about what I've done for him, and he's never said them out loud before. Just like this is like a father-son moment here. So thank you for facilitating that.
You guys
Ryan.
want to bro it out here, have a hug or anything?
Yeah,
Or you can do that when we're finished. There you go.
Don't mess up the mic there.
But yeah, it's been a really cool journey because when you're coaching somebody at anything, and Matt's finally, I would say we had a sea change over December and January, releasing this film and doing a whole bunch of live broadcasts in the press and this sort of stuff. We're having to be very, very honest about what we can do business-wise to continue this journey in film and what we can do physically-wise for ourselves and what we have to do so we can present ourselves as something that is inspirational or aspirational. I can be a chunky, dad-bod, 52-year-old guy, but he's the young guy, so we got to get him ripped and get him in the ring and that kind of stuff, right? So it's just, there's this really nice back and forth where, I'm the coach sometimes, but he's the filmmaker, and we're really learning from each other. And I'm sure you get inspired by your kids or the young people that work for you.
Yeah, and I've had people throughout my, when I was a young man and even throughout my young adulthood, I've also had people that I worked with who, were mentors to me. I was in the golf business for years when I was in university, and I've had a couple different guys who I worked for who were teaching professionals for whom I was an assistant teaching professional, and I learned a lot from these guys, and not just golf stuff, just sort of how to interact in the world and how to communicate with people and how to carry yourself and what to say and do and how to behave so that people will trust you and rely on what you say. And so I had fortunately I was lucky to have parents that took care of us and made sure to the best of their abilities we had everything they could provide, and we didn't want for anything growing up other than materialistic things. There was things that you look around and go, it'd be nice to have those things, but they were out of our reach financially. But we grew up with myself and my two brothers grew up with parents who we knew loved us and would take care of us and instilled these values in us. Parents didn't talk to their kids back then like we do now. Like I talk to my children much more, right? And my wife talks to my boys like very open dialogue about things. And it wasn't like that in the 80s and 70s, 80s, early 90s. But we knew, like we knew what we knew what the path was. We knew what the path we were supposed to be on and how we were supposed to conduct ourselves. And I went through, both myself and my brothers went all the way through school. None of us ever got in trouble. We didn't have behavioral problems. We didn't. But that's, because you knew that, you just knew. You didn't have to be reminded of it. And but in saying that, I also knew lots of people who did get into some shit growing up. And looking back, though, I can look back at their situation now as an adult and go, well, I could see why that guy might have had a difficult time, right? He didn't necessarily have the same environment I had to go home to. But a lot of those guys turn it around, and they're highly successful people and very influential and have families of their own. That's fantastic. But at some point in their life, they had to figure that out for themselves, or maybe they found somebody like in your situation where you guys, there's a mentorship there, and it doesn't mean that it's one or the other. You may grow up with the best parents in the world, and if you're lucky, you're going to meet even more great people as you go through your life who are going to inspire you again. You mentioned earlier, Matt, and also you touched on too, Sandy, you put yourself in a pretty vulnerable position when you decide you're going to turn the camera around on yourself. Even doing something like this, even just this podcast scenario where it's like you do open yourself up to a world of criticism, where whether people don't agree with what you're saying or how you're saying, or even very, shallow things comments that might come back your way. Absolutely. And you have to just say, well, it is what it is. I'm willing to take the good with the bad. Hopefully it's more good than bad.
We're both in professions that weaponize being exposed like this. Like if you're a fighter, and Sandy would be able to comment on this more, but you don't want a lot of tape because you don't want your opponent to know your movements, your behaviors, your patterns, so that they're studying you. So imagine if not only do they know how you fight, but who you are as a person and what kind of things you had to go through. The same as a journalist, right? You think of a journalist as being impartial and they don't have opinions and they don't have any political affiliations or whatever. But if you start putting out a journalist and they're a real person, then again, that can be weaponized. So I think we're daring to do something different. And, our stories are entangled and threaded, and we're ready to print this next chapter of Unretired.
I wanted to circle back just Yarmouth, Jador, and you and I talked offline. So my father's from Antigonish and his Pembroke. And then all the Pembrokes are from Canso originally. But so they moved to literally when Dad was born, hospital in Antigonish, and they built some homes there. Grandfather was a builder as well. But where we crossed over is where your father's from. My mother's from Glace Bay. So we moved out. So I was in Dartmouth as a kid and then Sydney. And then we went to Ottawa when I was 5. I got to see the difference as a teenager, how much you have a party or a birthday party or whatever, you were like kids in the basement or kids out of here, and the parents had their own party. Whereas here, it's a generational party. Somebody's birthday, somebody's graduation, whatever, holidays, that sort of stuff. Everybody's together. And so it really is the village raising the child here, where you get to have this beautiful little community thing. So Yarmouth, Glace Bay and Jador, Glace Bay and Antigonish, and then, all parts of the rest of the province as well, of course, for all of us. We've been around and families kind of spread out. Nova Scotia is just all small towns.
Right.
There's the city, which...
That's right.
And then there's the rest of Nova Scotia. And I think that's the beautiful thing that I'm realizing, maybe our healthcare system is busted, but the families take care of each other.
Right. There's a culture in Nova Scotia and in the Maritimes that exists and always has existed, and unfortunately, it seems to be fading away. And this is the culture that we all know, that very polite, friendly atmosphere that Canadians, are always known for being friendly, or always have been. But Maritimers have always been kind of like one step further than that.
Giant step.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, I still see it, and anytime I see it, I'm glad to see it. It warms my heart when I see somebody holding the door for the next person coming behind them as they walk into Sobeys, or that might be a bad example because they have sliding doors. But anywhere that you have a swinging door, I still hold the door for the guy coming behind me. And I appreciate the person who does that in front of me, and little things like that get taken for granted. I lived in Arizona for 2 years when I was a young man, 2021. Not the year 2021, 20 years old and 21 years old. And at that time I had, I moved to, this is, again, because I lived in Jador, this is pre-internet. I mean, we had a compact Presario computer or whatever it was, and it had dial-up modem at some point. But this is before, when I moved to Arizona for the first time. I mean, literally did not know where Arizona was on the map. I knew it was the southern US, right? I went to a school. There was an ad for the school in the, Golf Week or Golf magazine. I was working in a golf shop. It was in my first year of university at St. Mary's. I called the 800 number. They sent me a package the following September. Put everything I had in a hockey bag, grabbed my golf clubs, and moved. A guy I never met before who was going to be my roommate picked me up at the airport, and it was a good experience. And I met people from all over the U.S. and some people from Europe that had come there, and a few Canadians that had come there. So it was a good experience. But man, I mean, Arizona's the desert, right? It's, and completely different climate and atmosphere than I was used to. And I missed the ocean when I was there. Like it was, you couldn't really put your finger on it, but then you'd come home and you go, oh, okay, yeah, there's no water around down there. You can't even find a lake really. Little ponds in all these communities or so on. But that's where I was down there in golf school. And that's where I first started to, two things. One, I realized, okay, I think I'd like to be in the golf business. I like this. I'd like to be perhaps a teaching pro or a golf pro. But it's also where I first started to realize, I started to have a vision for what I wanted my life to look like. Part of being there was playing golf, basically every day. And you go to these golf courses that I had never seen before, where there are golf holes with houses on both sides, and you drive into these communities, gated communities and things, and some of them were just sort of regular city street, and you hang a right and you're in the golf course, and then there's just regular houses along the golf course. And that's when I started to visualize myself owning a home and having a pool. And I'd see, I was only 20, 21 years old, but I'd see, we'd be playing golf and I'd see dad and mom and a couple of kids jumping around the pool, and the wheels started to turn in my head as to how I wanted my life to look. That's where that first came, because before I went there, my mind was never, ever, those thoughts never crossed my mind at all. I was just a kid. But it started to come together for me a bit, because you started to get a little more of a worldview and started to see some things differently. It was a good experience.
I'm going to pick a fight with you right now. So
not physically, I hope.
I tell people.
You win.
Well, good negotiation. I tell people I don't hit anybody for free.
Yeah, good.
So, so if Brendan wants to pay us, then maybe. But Brendan found us, reached out to me about coming on the podcast, did a quick look at him. So, okay, well, that's the producer for sure. That guy's got some serious credentials. And then I looked at you, and I saw the Arizona Golf, and I'm like, oh, okay, so he's got a big company making nice homes, and he spent a couple of years playing golf in the States. Can't wait to meet this trust fund princess. Swear to God. And I was like, well,
fair enough.
I know a lot of these guys. I'm sure he'll be very polished and he'll be polite, and it'll be a great podcast. And then I looked and I saw the production value. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I was talking to Brendan, and he's like, nope. I was like, oh. And there's that beautiful, story of judging a book by its cover.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. So no, small fishing village in tiny little town or not even a town, a community.
It's a village, it's a fishing village is what it was. I mean, and I don't say this. I'm not.
And Glace Bay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my dad. Both my parents came from absolutely no money.
Right.
And we had absolutely no money. I mean, my parents were. They both worked their whole life, and we went. I would say I don't like to do the Kamala Harris thing. I'm from a middle class family. I'm not from a middle class family. I'm from a lower middle class family.
Yep.
When I mention to people, when I graduated from university, when I started my life as a young man, started my career, my net worth was minus $50,000, right? Because I had student loans. I'm not trying to paint some kind of sob story for myself by any means.
But it's good to know where people come from.
Yeah, well, you can sum it up with absolute certainty. I do not come from any money but I come from a loving family that instilled the values in me that have made me who I am today, coupled along with my own natural drive. I was an absolute tippy top of the class student my entire life. I was, I went to university on a scholarship, academic scholarship. In 11th grade, I was awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Award for, top male student. They give it to a male and female student each year.
So are you smart or are you a geek?
I'm smart. Yeah,
Keep going.
Smart. I don't geek out very well. I'm too.
You're rounded.
Yeah, I was also captain of the volleyball team and played baseball and captain of the ski race team, and I was an athlete, and I loved sports.
Yeah.
It's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's all I ever wanted to do. I was your typical, 1980s young man growing up with 3 channels on the TV that we had. We didn't have cable television until I was like 14 years old or something, right? But I was your typical young man who had dreams of playing Major League Baseball. You go to bed at night laying there staring at the ceiling, just dreaming of being a professional baseball player, or whatever was motivating you at the time. But I didn't grow up thinking I want to be a home builder or even a business owner. That thought never crossed my mind. That wasn't there. It was just that just came as time went on. But no, I certainly do not come from any money. I have money now because I made it. And
honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very
honestly,
simply.
Yes. And I also have made people around me financially very well off, not to anyone's detriment. I haven't made $1 in this world to anyone's detriment, right? I build homes, I operate a business, I employ people, I generate a lot of tax for the taxpayers and citizens of Canada and Nova Scotia, and I'm happy to do that. And I was also very fortunate as a young man, right, in my last year of university, to meet somebody who, my wife, when we met 4 years ago, to meet somebody who also had the same core values and came from a similar middle-class family, and my wife's dad owned his own business and worked very hard, and so she had those same values, and she and I, from day one, wanted the same things out of life. So we just put our heads together and moved in that direction. And my wife's also super smart and very responsible and artistic. And she was a kitchen designer. So when I first started in the real estate and construction business, my wife was a kitchen designer, and she worked for 2 different companies over the course of a few years, and she was excellent at that. And she's still, to this day, when I build a home in say an unsold home where I have the input as to how we're finishing that, my wife I'll send the kitchen plans to her, and she'll look them over and give her 2 cents, because she's still the best I know at it, because again, her spatial recognition, just laying things out, she's very good at that. And we were fortunate enough that when my wife, when my first son was born 18 years ago, at that point, my wife went on maternity leave, and that was it. But she didn't go back into the workforce.
Yeah.
But by doing that, I was able to put my head down and really pound on the business, and she was keeping it on lock. She had it locked down at home, and I knew my kids were well taken care of, and everybody was happy, and that allowed me to pursue a career and pursue a business. And when my boys were young and when my business was young, I was 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14, 16 hours a day.
Yep.
It's what you had to do. I'm not there now. I have time to do things like this, but now I've shifted a bit away from, I don't say this to, sometimes when I say these things, I get nervous that people are going to say, "What, this guy's full of shit," but I'm really not. I'm at a point in my life now where I look at where the world is, but locally, I look at where we are locally in this world, and there's things that I'm just very pragmatic the way I look at it. And I look at what's going on, I'm thinking, what? This is not sustainable, right? This doesn't work. I could just ignore this and ride this out. And financially, I'll look after myself, my kids, and my grandkids. No, they're fine. I've worked hard to make sure that I can make that happen. But that's not good enough for me, because like we talked about yesterday, if I'm fortunate enough to still be here in 40 years' time, I don't want to look out the window at the world my grandchildren are living in and have it, it's on fire because because whether it's through mismanagement or politics or whatever it is that goes on, it's just, we have to, I just feel like we have to have these conversations and start trying to work some things out. And I think we should always rely on the people who have the experience and the expertise. And so if we're talking housing, I'm happy to offer my 2 cents. But I consider myself a common sense expert because that's what I've relied on my whole life, making practical, rational, logical, reasonable decisions. And that's how I got where I am. I didn't get where I am today by exploiting anybody or taking advantage of anyone or winning the lottery.
But seriously, though, when I'm thinking about what you do, I think it's it's really important because we all live in homes and homes are like a representation of who we are as people. Mm-hmm. And it's cool that you're now kind of in a different aspect looking at people because I'd be interested to know, like, when you're building a home, I would assume you get to know a person at some level and what they like, what they don't like. And
yeah, absolutely. It's a custom home build because of the duration of time. And also because of the fact that you're having conversations with folks that they're providing you with a lot of personal information, their personal financial situation. And they'll even talk about things related to their family. We have 2 sons and a daughter, and she's this age and he's that age, and he likes to do this and she's like to do that. There's laying it all out there. And this is oftentimes in the first meeting I have with folks. You might be sitting down, this is meeting number 1, and they're laying it out there. They're telling me where they work and how long they've been there and how much money they have to spend and how much money they would like to spend. And I mean, it can be a very intimate relationship. Ideally, we want it to be a very positive experience. It's something that they're looking forward to, and then they move into the house and everything's happy. And that's, generally speaking, of course, that's how it works. But sometimes you run into situations when you're building a house and some not good news comes up, right? Like, they perhaps some unexpected costs, or we've built houses for folks before that, quite literally during construction, somebody loses a job, right? And that's awkward and it's tough because we can't unbuild this thing, right? So you work your way through it. I've never had any earth-shattering, disastrous things, but even in the last couple of years, I've had folks who the house is built, a custom-built home. It's built, finished, ready for them to move in, and they run into a financial situation. Something changed, interest rates went up, or they're having trouble getting their money from the country it's in to here, or whatever the case may be. And so that can be nerve-wracking because I feel for them, but at the same time, it's like, we got to figure something out here, right? There's $1.5 million worth of house sitting over there, and it's your house, right? So, yeah, it's a very rewarding career. It's a rewarding business, and if you do it well and you treat people with respect and you look after them, then everybody's happy. But like anything, every type of person, every type of personality buys houses and owns houses. So we also run into the 2 or 3%. Right? I mean, they exist, right? They exist. The people who are only happy when they're miserable. The people who you absolutely, no matter what you do, you cannot please them. The people who are completely unreasonable. Yep. The people who have absolutely no empathy. They can't in any way, they can't see it anybody's way other than their own. You run into these folks, and it's unfortunate, but you just have to work your way through. I've always been able to talk to people, certainly as you get, the older you get. I think you get better at that. If you're good at it, you get better as time goes on. But I can talk to anybody. I mean, anybody, because I think my life experience as what I do for a living has helped that. Because on any given day, I could be talking to, somebody, someone that's banging roof shingles onto a house in the morning, and the ER physician or surgeon who we're building for later that day. Those are 2 totally different conversations that we're going to have. Those folks have different levels of education, different life experiences. But I am equally comfortable talking to both of those folks because I can relate to them. They may not be as comfortable talking to me, but that doesn't faze me. There's nobody that I would be intimidated by speaking to.
Yeah.
But that's not saying, I'm not saying that because I feel like I'm worthy to speak to anybody. I feel like I can relate. I'll find some common ground.
Yeah.
And I can relate to them. And I mean, there'd be, of course, depending on who it is, I would let them do all the talking if given the opportunity. But I think this is how you get through, this is how you get to the bottom of things. You have conversation about it. And in my world, from a business perspective now, sometimes you have to be, you sort of have to be the last line of defense, maybe from a business perspective. You get to a scenario where, perhaps your staff have exhausted everything they can do to try to make this person happy, and they've done everything that they know that you want them to do, and then they go, I don't know what to do with this person anymore. And so sometimes I have to be bad cop, maybe, if you want to look at it that way. I don't enjoy that, but I am somebody who, for better or worse, when I get to the point that I realize I'm talking to somebody who's being unreasonable, and they're just being unreasonable for the sake of being unreasonable, I'm not as pleasant then, right? And sometimes you just have to tell people, look, this isn't going to work for me. You're clearly trying to take advantage, or worse yet, I can get less professional when I know somebody's lying to me. Like if somebody's looking me in the eye and telling me a lie, and I know the truth, then the Jadorian comes out, right? Then that guy that grew up in the woods is like, don't give me that shit, right? I get along with everybody in my life, everybody that I run into in life, other than people who are being assholes.
Yeah.
Because people who are assholes, I then become an asshole. They don't like that very much, right? Because they're used to going through life, banging around, smashing and pushing people around and getting what they want, and then they run into somebody who won't do that, and that's just who I am.
There's only a few of us that can do that. I came up with a hashtag bully the bully years ago. Like I said, I got lots of teachers in my life, and I teach martial arts, as a side gig or whatever, or as a part of my bigger sort of offering. But there's this world now where we're not supposed to bully the bully back, and we're not supposed to stand up for ourselves and this kind of stuff. And I don't think you and I are on that side. No,
I think bullying. I'm not suggesting that I like the idea of someone going to school and being bullied, but bullying is a natural process that humans go through, especially with young men, especially with men in general. My close group of friends who we've been friends for, for
you rip
20,
on
30
each
years.
other.
Yes. That's how you keep each other in check. That's how you monitor one another. And it comes from a place, it comes from the heart. It doesn't come from trying to make them feel bad or trying to hurt their feelings, or it comes from a place of mutual respect. But even for people that aren't your friends, for instance, bullying serves a purpose, right? If there's no bullying, then the psychopaths reign supreme, right? The sociopaths reign supreme.
Narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths.
Nobody's keeping them in check, because the collective masses, through the process that we simply refer to as bullying, I don't know that it can always be couched that way, but we always kept those people in check, and now they're leading the political parties.
And I think, if this does get soundbited by somebody, I'll try and manage the language here. So bully the bully is a hashtag I still stand by, and I throw it out there a few times a year anyway still. So if somebody's really just a bully or a jerk, or somebody's trying to work you, or, a narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, somebody that's trying to disingenuously push their agenda on you, whether this is physically shoving Matthew or something at a board table and, or in business, or trying to beat you for some money, this kind of stuff. There's people that are just bullies, and they get away with it because that check and balance has been evaporated in the last many years. So it's not that we need to bully, we don't need bullies to take care of them, but you need to meet force with force.
Right.
And I mean, that's, I teach my kids that, kids and adults, because I've got I got some Wild West guys that come there, learn how to fight in their 40s and 50s and this sort of stuff. And I'm like, listen, you know, don't be driving like I've seen you drive, and jump out of your car and show them this great new combination I just taught you. Like, you know,
Right.
use this stuff when it's needed. But giving people the confidence is what I'm trying to do, is that so when somebody is bullying somebody out there in public or bullying you, that you can stand up to them and use your words first.
Of course, yeah, of
and
course.
if you have to, you know, physically. But yeah, there's lots of people out there that are just unchecked bullies. And I mean, I've had it done to me in business settings so many times where I'm very passive and quiet, and it's not quiet, sorry. I'm very passive and just get along and this sort of stuff. And sometimes people are just, you know, they have authority view. I've gone into the corporate world a few times on a contract, and there's a guy, a VP or something, and they can just, or a girl, or a man or a woman, and they just push and they push and push just to see what they can do because they, you know, and pushing back, I think, is a really important skill set.
Yeah, it is. It happens in my, it happens naturally in my profession in the construction business, because there's a natural hierarchy of what we do, right? There are contractors and subcontractors, and even some of the subcontractors have their own subs, and then there's employees, and so there is a natural hierarchy. It's undeniable. And sometimes we run into situations where you might get somebody who's taking advantage and, you know, being unreasonable or even being rude and disrespectful to, say, a staff member of mine, or doesn't happen very often with clients, but you know, you can see it. Sometimes it'll happen with staff or even other tradespeople. And so there's time where I'm not a physically intimidating creature by any means, but there's times where sometimes I got to pick up the phone and call this guy and say, like, who the fuck are you talking to?
Yeah.
Right? Have you lost your mind? You're not in charge here. And I don't want to have to do it that way, but it's kind of like that. You know, it's kind of like the scene or the line from A Few Good Men from back in the 90s where you need me on that wall.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
There has to be somebody there.
100%.
Hopefully you don't hear from him. Hopefully he never has to say it, but he has to be there to protect the people on the other side of the wall. Because there has to be somebody who's willing to stand up and take the shit. Right? And of course, ideally what you want that person is to be morally grounded, so you know they're not just looking for an opportunity to get into it with someone. It's always cooler heads prevail, and let's talk this through. And I honestly believe that a great deal of the reason why I've been successful as a business owner and why I have relationships with other tradespeople and suppliers that have worked with me now for, you know, literally the whole time since the beginning, is because we have a very good mutual agreement and relationship of respect, and I understand. We each understand what we bring to the table, and we both know that we need one another. And I look at this is where, for instance, I'll make a comment here that, again, it's in the news. Everybody's talking about. So you talk about this Trump tariff thing, and Trump and Trudeau, and what's going on with the border and all this noise. So it's constantly being talked about, and everyone, you know, folks are obviously quick to fault the U.S. and Trump and his administration for that. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it as Trump is a businessman, first and foremost. That's what he's always been, and that's what you can see with how he deals with things. He's very matter of fact, very pragmatic about how he deals with it, regardless of whether or not you agree with him. His method is he's methodical. And I look at this situation with Canada and the U.S., not as a political expert, because again, I'm not one, but I am a common sense expert, and I do consider myself a business expert and a relationship expert related to businesses. And this is a scenario where think of the US as a company and Canada as a company, because again, as you know, my belief when it comes to politics and government is that that's the only thing they should be taking care of, is the business of things, right?
Agreed.
So we have the US, for argument's sake, let's just say we got a company that's 10 times the size of the other one. And regardless of how it breaks down, we know that there's trade back and forth, and you can argue who's more important to who, but let's face it, the U.S. is in control here, okay?
Yes, 100%.
And we need them. We need that relationship, but they also are far better off with us having a good relationship. I look at it as contractor, sub-trade.
Yep.
So we have and furthermore, I view this scenario as us as the smaller company have mismanaged our business so terribly that it is now having a negative impact on that business. And the people in charge of that business have said to us, get your shit together or else.
We're not doing business anymore.
That's right. Because your shit is now affecting our shit.
Yep.
And we're not going to have it. So here's what you're going to need to do, or here's what we're going to do. And in my world, it would work something like, again, this would be, you don't want it to get to this point. This would be, we're at a point where if I draw a similarity between, everyday life in my world and what's happening there, this is a point where I've had to pick up the phone and say, listen, if you guys don't get your shit together, then I'm going to make it financially uncomfortable for you.
Yep.
Because that's the only way I can get you to pay attention. Right. You're not paying attention. You're not doing your job.
Yep.
You're letting everybody down. You're screwing with my business. You're screwing with my employees. You're screwing with the safety and security of both of these businesses. And we both know that we're better off with one another, but you're not holding up your end of the bargain. So get it together. I don't even look at it the same way. I guess when I was saying earlier that you need bullies, that's not really necessarily it. You need people in the world to keep the bullies in check.
Yep.
Because the bullies who have malicious intent, those who aim to harm, those who mean to harm, the narcissists, the sociopaths, the psychopaths, they have to be kept in check by the rest of us who can recognize that and go, oh, no, that's not going to happen here. We're not doing that.
I bring that up because it's kind of a little bit like a word association game, and like people have different opinions about what bullying is or not. But like, I guess by me bringing this up, having those negative experiences of it, like I'm just communicating there, but I'm glad that you bring that clarification about what you mean as bullying. And I didn't really take it that way either, but I appreciate the clarification for people that are watching.
I can remember growing up as a kid, there were a few instances, like I don't remember specific examples now. I just remember the feeling, the sensation of it. I remember being in school and being witness to somebody who's shy and sheepish and, one of the real introvert types who was being made fun of or bullied for something, physical appearance or how they look or the fact that they're wearing torn clothing or whatever it is. I can remember being witness to that. And again, I was never a physical presence. So I had to pick my battles when it came to that. But I can remember there being times growing up as a kid and somebody being bullied or made fun of to the point that I could feel their discomfort. I could feel their pain. It would bother the shit out of me. It was heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of, as I got older and you get to a point where you realize, well, physicality no longer has anything to do with this. This isn't coming to blows. But that might be part of the motivation why when I recognize that, when I see somebody doing that, I just want to get in there. I want to pick the fight, right? I want to step up and say, okay, man, if you want to do that, let's go at it. Here's a question for you related to boxing and fighting in general. Like, based on I think you just answered this question, but I was going to ask you before that anyway. Do you get angry? Is that an element of it when you're fighting?
It's a great question. And Matt and I actually had a big discussion, or back into my academic days, an academic argument about that. There's absolutely no benefit to being angry when you're fighting. It is
interesting.
It is the mastery of self. You have to be in calm, calculated control as much as humanly possible. The burst of anger comes with a massive dump of adrenaline. So if I snap and lose it and try to just angrily knock somebody out in the middle of a round, I go back to that stool at the end of the round and he's not knocked out. I'm done. I'm gassed. Everything in my body's fired. Everything's kicked out. You got nothing left. So you have to have calm, cool, controlled aggression. And the way I relate that to other people, to just people that have never done that sort of thing, and is when you and I were talking here today, and you were saying when you have to flip the switch a little bit and get a little bit terse or angry or belligerent back to someone that's bullying you, someone in your company or something. I imagine when you're talking to those people, you're just calm, cool, and collected and putting them in their place.
Yeah, I don't raise my voice. I certainly don't yell at people or start cursing them out or anything.
Right.
But so I'm very matter of fact.
Right.
And I'm not pleasant. Right. I'm certainly not pleasant to talk to.
You can feel the anger, but do you almost find yourself a bit like, okay, I'm now controlling this situation, so you're calm and addressing it. So yes, you're going to use terse, hard, necessary language, but you're not angry. You're not mad.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Same.
No, it's interesting.
Same.
It's interesting.
Exactly the
And
same.
I can also draw the parallel back to, believe it or not, the same thing is true. It may be true with all of sports, but it's certainly true when it comes to golf. I've said this to many people over the years who I've taught golf lessons to, buddies of mine but even some younger kids who were pretty good golfers who I was coaching, back in the day to become better golfers, help them kind of work on their mind and their approach. But I say this to everybody, is that you cannot play good golf angry.
Oh, yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And when you look at the best golfers in the world, the professionals, they are in complete control of their emotions.
Yeah.
And as soon as you can see it happen, as soon as they lose control of their emotions, it's over.
Oh, yeah.
There's no coming back from that.
Rage Against Machine says anger is a gift if you can control it. But, well, I guess I added if you can control it. But, yeah, Matt and I were in the basement not that long ago in a, was it a 10 by 10, 12 by 12 room, like not a big room. And there's one of those, what do you call those, silver sort of metal support beams.
Okay, yeah, I know what you mean. Yep, just a post.
Just a post.
Metal
Well,
post. Yep.
It's a post. It looks like a post. Yeah.
I was going to say, stripper pole? What the fuck are you guys doing down there?
Did you want to be the first client, Ryan? You can come over and do some pole dancing.
No, I do not want to do that.
You can come over and box.
I do not want to do that.
So Matt is really getting in the ring this year. Like we're shooting for 3 months from now. We've got another coach involved in this, and we got to have that chat with him tomorrow, I think. And anyway, so Matt had a very bad experience with a professional boxer that he was training with for a while, and this guy was using Matt as a punching bag. Okay. And which, like Matt and I will spar, and I was trying to teach Matt, like sparring. Sparring is, for some people don't know, it's just the terminology where we practice fighting, right? And you're supposed to take care of your partner, right? So you and I could spar, Ryan, and I have no idea if you ever how many punches you've thrown in your life. I wouldn't even throw any punches at you in the beginning. I would just practice defense and move and get out of the way, and I have a mouth guard and gloves and headgear on, so I wouldn't get hurt. When we're both trying to hit each other and this sort of stuff, and we're big guys, so we're heavyweights, so we need to be very careful of how we touch each other. And it really should be touch sparring. At a certain point, I'd taken Matt for a really hard 45-minute warm-up, like a walk-run sort of thing, and done some sprints. And then we were doing 6 rounds, and I think we were in the 3rd or 4th round. And Matt snapped. He snapped, and I went flying from about you to where that pole was in the basement, and I hit that pole, and every vertebrae from my tailbone to my neck went like that. And then I was back. And a lot of people would have snapped and knocked Matt out. He's got a good chin, so it might not have been able to knock him out, but it could have hurt him. But I was, for me, I was in a coaching role, so I just kind of moved around, and I didn't tell him I was hurt. I didn't tell him until a few weeks later. And then I gave him the minute off between rounds, and I made him do 2 more rounds. So they kept the coaching going and that sort of stuff because I had a plan, and I was trying to take him into the deep end and drown him, and I didn't expect that emotional of a response or that specific one, but I was trying to push him to break him, just coaching 101, right? Mm-hmm. And in that kind of sport, he says he wants to fight. Well, let's drown you now. Train hard so you can fight easy. That's a old age boxing sort of adage. And we both learned a lot from it after, and Matt, it hasn't happened since, and Matt's realized that you're not supposed to fight angry, and those demons that we're facing, or bullying from childhood, or issues with whatever, all that stuff will come out in the ring, and we just have to make sure that it doesn't come out in a place where you hurt the people that you're training with. Yeah, but yeah, it was a great experience, and I
sorry, Sandy, by the way.
Cheers, buddy. You're good. It's part of it, right? Yeah. And as part of the journey we're on, and like Matt said, it's pretty exciting for him. So he's got some big hills to climb here to get into the ring himself, but he's put 8 or 9 years in the boxing ring, plus the martial arts before that. So he's incredibly very good athlete. He's got all of this tools, all the skills. He's got dramatically great experience. So we just got to get him consistent on the physical side of just eating the right things and moving the right amount every day. And in three months from now, we'll we'll have a pretty good documentary about Matt's journey into the ring and
Awesome.
and me there guiding him to it.
I'm putting this out there because it's going to be put out there in the film anyway, so it's not like whatever, but I used to have a lot of anger issues when I was younger. I think it stemmed from like a lot of family things and stuff like that, but it disappeared. And for some reason, when it's boxing, it comes back. And I think maybe it's the drowning part that Sandy's saying, and you know, you're trying to think your way out of a puzzle as much as you can, but the puzzle is also hurting you at the same time. And at a certain point, you just shake the puzzle and you hope that it solves itself.
So anything else you guys would like to, anything we didn't hit on that you want to cover? Now's your chance to throw it out there. And
yeah, I mean, I think the main thing for us is, at least for me, like just to put something real out there. And, you know, we discussed like a lot of stuff today. But I just wanted to thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk, because I feel like we are at a very pivotal part of both of our journeys, me and Sandy. And it's crazy to say that because Sandy, like you're, you know, 52, but we're going into new avenues here, and I'm really excited because he has a lot of experience, and the fact that it's exciting Sandy is exciting for me because, you know, he's been around many different circles, and you know, he's very light about some of this stuff, but you know, being a sparring partner for a world champion boxer, being a world champion kickboxer. So I mean, like, he's very light on those things, but for him to be excited, I'm excited, and I'm really scared too. I'm scared about the fact that I actually have to put myself and do what I'm saying. So that's scary, and I'm excited for when it happens.
well, I wish you the best of luck. I'll look forward to watching it and seeing it as it unfolds. That'd be interesting. Where can everybody see the documentary, the one you've already produced? Where would you like to send them?
So you can find it anywhere.
Yep.
It's called UNRETIRED, The Return of Sandy Pembroke, and that's Pembroke. We're trending on Google, so under that unretired name, so that's good.
YouTube.
Obviously, it's on YouTube, you know, Facebook, etc., that kind of stuff. And to your question, where we are, I wanted to say, lovely chat, and I love that your idea for your podcast here is really just a vehicle for change, and you're doing this on a level locally and with people and that sort of stuff. And really, we're all aligned here because we're trying to use Matt's gift for storytelling to tell our stories about things like battling with obesity and health and bullies and that sort of stuff. And then just how does that translate to personal accountability and what we can do for ourselves on a daily basis. And we're doing this in a reality storytelling sort of, you know, documentary sort of way. And that's, so I guess that's why we're at this table. We're all sort of trying to figure out the way to impact the world for the better.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the way to do that. And sometimes I find, sometimes I'll get thinking, you know, after the fact, you're at home and quiet with your thoughts, and I'll be like, oh man, do I really want to do this? Do I want to be doing this? And I don't mean from a motivational perspective as to what's motivating me to do it, but physically being on camera and put my opinion out there. And sometimes I'm thinking, oh man, do I want to do this? Especially in your case, where physically you're going to film yourself, and like you said, shirts off. You're there for the world to see. You know, in many cases, kind of like it's not like you're looking your best necessarily, and that could even be the same way on really any social media front. Anyone that does that, puts themselves out there, you're subject to scrutiny.
In my day job, I ghostwrite for a lot of guys with your day job. So I ghostwrite social media accounts for founders, owners, that sort of stuff. So you're not rare in that respect. Like, you're out there all the time business-wise. You don't want to be out there for just every Tom, Dick, and Harry to be taking shots at you and accessing photos of your kids and, you know, getting into your personal lives and that kind of stuff, which is great. That you've naturally sort of vaccinated yourself from that. But here you are now doing this. I have a quick question. Do you ever, when you're watching your stuff after you've shot one of these, do you kind of like, Like, do you?
Oh, no
do you
question,
get a bit?
man. No question. The first episode that we shot, the first episode, maybe the first even 2 or 3 episodes that we shot. You could ask my wife on this one. I was struggling. I was like, Amy, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't like
Sell this equipment.
Yeah, I don't like looking at myself on camera. I don't. This might sound weird too, man. You guys you'll understand this, I'm sure, but there is a certain element of it when it comes to this, and it's mainly the video component that does this for me. Mm-hmm. That's why I say if this was a radio show, I wouldn't feel the same way. Mm-hmm. But there's a certain element to it where, not that I am this way, but I feel like it can be misinterpreted as you're somewhat narcissistic to think that people want to even hear what you have to say. Right. And that's the part that I probably struggle with the most, because I don't think that way. Mm-hmm. But the proof's in the pudding. So if we have a conversation and we put these conversations out there and people gravitate to it and they're watching and listening to it, then I guess they do want to hear what we have to say, right? Yeah. But there is a certain element of that where and it's similar to when I started in the real estate business, 20 some years ago. In the real estate business, you're not selling houses, you're selling yourself. Yep. You're selling your services. And in the real estate business, now this is back before social media, but it was get your face on billboards, get your face on cards, put your face on the real estate signs, run ads, whatever, face. And I hated that. I always hated that from day one, but I did it because I knew you got to play the game. There's no sense putting all this time and energy into it and leaving out these things that are important elements that you're just not comfortable with. Just get over it and do what you need to do, because otherwise you're just selling yourself short. But back then, the biggest reason why I didn't like doing that is not because I thought people would be turned off by looking at me or would think I was doing something different than anybody else, but I felt this certain bit of, isn't that kind of narcissistic to be putting my face on the sign? I don't want to do that, right? And I have a bit of the same sensation when it comes to this, but I just have to get over it. Part of getting over it is realizing, look, man, there's like however many millions of people that have podcasts and YouTube channels. I'm just another face on there that somebody goes, who's this guy? And if what we're saying resonates and it makes them want to tune back in, then that's all I'm after. If down the road, if years from now we're still going strong and there are however many subscribers and listeners, then my perception will be different, because then at that point I'll think, well, but there are people who want to hear what I have to say and what the people who I'm talking to have to say. Yeah. And so that'll be enough for me. Good. But initially, there's an uneasiness there. Yeah. I'm enjoying doing it because I enjoy having the conversations, and ultimately my motivation is I would like to someday be able to look back and go, and just be able to say that made a difference. Yeah. If it and I don't mean that. I'm not trying to sound corny. I'm not going to solve the world's problems here.
No, but you're chipping away, man.
That's all. Exactly. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to chip away at what I think is something that needs to be chipped away at. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. Appreciate you guys being here.
This was great. Thank
you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Best of luck with
We're inviting ourselves back. We'll see you in a couple months.
We'll do it again. If nothing else, let's reconvene on the other side of the new venture and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.